And that's the one big takeaway that I think it's focus, 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 and make it simple, simple, simple. Because you're not a mind reader as a listing agent. You got to help people envision their own business. And that's a great way to do it.
Hello and welcome to episode 62 of the Smart Agents Podcast. My name is Michael Walter and I'll be your host. In today's episode, we're joined by Chris Gunderson to talk all about commercial real estate. After getting his start in California, Chris started his own company, GundersonCRE, in New Jersey. Throughout our conversation, we talk all about how Chris got his start in the industry, his top tips for agents looking to break into commercial real estate, and where he sees the immediate future of commercial real estate going. Now, before we get on to today's featured interview, make sure to subscribe to the Smart Agents Podcast. You can find the show on all major podcasting platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and now Amazon Music. Also, as you can see if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to the Smart Agents YouTube channel. Click the bell to get notifications when each new episode is uploaded. And lastly, if you or somebody else on your team has an awesome story or tip to share with our community, send us a message at feedback@smartagents.com. We're always on the lookout for new stories to share. All right, let's get on to the day's featured interview with Chris Gunderson. I had a great time talking with him, and I hope you enjoy our conversation. I guess, just kind of starting out a little bit, can you tell me, where you're at in the country and who you are?
So I'm Chris Gunderson. I was born in Connecticut and raised most of my life in South Jersey. And went to school in Boston, right outside Boston, a place called Endicott College. And then I was working outside of New York City in Greenwich, Connecticut. And was trying to get into finance, didn't really, was emailing hedge fund managers and all that kind of stuff. And just for some reason, it's almost like the universe was not letting me fit in there. Didn't go to an Ivy League school, didn't have any kind of strong financial connections to people at the top there. So I was pretty not concerned, I guess you would say. I was pretty determined to go to Los Angeles. I was dating a girl at the time whose dad was pretty high up in the media industry. And it got to a point where, I wanted to go so bad. I said, I'll sleep in my car and, shower at the YMCA. And my dad really didn't understand it. And then I got to have three pretty substantial job interviews, one at William Morris Endeavor, one for a real estate guy that had made a lot of money in commercial real estate, and then another for a clothing company. So I had all these three interviews lined up, and I met the guy who owned this real estate company for dinner on a Friday night, and we ended up talking for about 2 hours. He told me all about his business, how he made all his money. He started from about 40,000 square feet, a retail center right next to the largest housing project in Long Beach. And he was able to leverage it to about 7 million square feet of industrial, retail, and office space throughout the state of California. So he told me pretty much, the nuts and bolts of how he made his fortune. And he said, you know what, after 2008, he was kind of recouping. The banks were finally catching up and saying, hey, you got to fix up these properties, such and such. And he said, I just hired a kid that's your age. I don't really need anybody, but you seem like a nice guy, kind of a thing. And, let me think about it. Maybe you could do this. Maybe you could do that. So I left the dinner kind of thinking, it was great to meet someone who has literally made $1 billion from practically something that the average Joe, so to speak, could go and buy a retail center and then in a not a nice area and leverage it to the point where, you got 2 private jets and a 100-foot yacht. So that, just being in awe of all of that, I still had my hopes up. And I got an email the next Monday from him. And he said, I'll pay you $50,000. I'll teach you everything I know, and you start in 10 days.
There you go.
I couldn't say no. Especially after meeting him in person. I flew back home to New Jersey a couple of days later, packed up my car, drove cross country in a 1999 Toyota Camry, slept in my car, and started work for him the next morning. I wanted more than 10 days, but this wasn't someone that you could be like, oh, well, can I take, 3 weeks, or can I start in a month kind of a thing? It's almost like, this was the kind of guy that characterized himself as if he got stuff done and you're either in or you're out,
Yeah.
So
yeah. It's quite the introduction to things then.
Yeah. It was a great experience. I'm extremely thankful and extremely grateful for everything he's taught me. His door was open every single day. He would have conversations with attorneys, with brokers, with other landlords, with heads of major banks. And I sat 20 feet away from him. And I absorbed and learned all of how he handled business, how he handled people, and just couldn't get enough of it, to the point where, I'd stay in the office until 10 p.m. at night because he would come in later in the day and just sit there and listen to his stories and how he made all of his money and how he treated people and how he got things done that other people hadn't thought of before. Quick two examples that I'll give you is he was able to convert a shopping center that had lost its grocery store anchor. And he went to the local community college and he said, do you want to put your community college? I know you need more room. How about you put it in the grocery store that I used to have? And they said, sure. So, that's something that you don't really hear of. He had properties in areas that weren't, that desirable in terms of, we're not talking anywhere near like Rodeo Drive or anything like that. And he would give free space to the police department instead of hiring a security team, paying for someone to come around and help secure the property. He would just go to the local police department and say, do you guys want a sub office here? It's yours for free. So it was stuff like that I learned that most people don't think of. And I'm excited to kind of start it on my own. So.
Right. So, yeah. So tell me about, so that's where you started and where are you at right now?
Yeah. So I pretty much, after absorbing all the information I could from him and how things work, I decided to, after COVID, kind of move back to South Jersey and start my own commercial real estate company. Both working with clients, working both on the landlord and tenant side, industrial, retail, and office. It's been a little bit of a grind in the terms of getting used to how things are done on the East Coast, with going back to California and then coming back here. So those experiences have been, I guess you could call them growing pains. But I'm very thankful in the fact that I was able to come back here because of what I've learned in California. I'm able to look at things from a different perspective than, as if I never left South Jersey kind of a thing. I would just think that what is in South Jersey is the norm and not think anything else was,
Right. So, so having that previous experience, how is that? What are some of those things that you have really kind of been able to transition over to into your business, especially in a time during COVID where, people that aren't familiar with commercial real estate, all they hear is this is a terrible time for commercial real estate.
It's funny. I think a lot of the commercial real estate and compared to residential has always had that upper echelon of like, oh, that's only for the big players. I don't know anyone. It's way too complicated, that kind of mentality. And I'll be the first person to tell you that, yeah, it sucks getting to be able to learn the nuts and bolts of the industry and how properties are run. But once you get there, it's, you see the benefits instead of doing open houses on Saturdays and Sundays. And, most commercial brokers take off the weekends, unlike residential. And there's also, I think, a great opportunity for it's, just like residential in the sense of if you spent all your time in residential building up your book and, going out for marketing and referrals and help people listing or selling houses, I would take that same amount of time. And if this is for someone who's trying to in residential, but has aspirations to get into commercial, I would start out residential, learn the industry and the very basics, and then try to find somebody within your own firm or go take night classes at a community college. That's what I did when I was working for this guy doing commercial real estate. One of his biggest thing was even though he was still in commercial, he was never in residential. He was like, I took classes at UCLA, night classes at UCLA, Long Beach City College, Orange County Coast College. Like, it didn't matter where it was. And it was the same classes, but it was taught by different professors. So he was able to gain different insights from different people about how things are run and different avenues about how to strategically do a deal one way versus another. And you just need to soak up as much knowledge as you can, because in commercial real estate, I mean, that is really the economy. Like, the more you know, the better you are. And so for someone that's in residential that might want to jump into commercial, I would say learn as much as you can, and then prepare yourself, and maybe find a mentor that's within your firm that does some commercial on the side, and then still go take those night classes. I mean, you can take them at a community college or, wherever you can learn the most information, like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, even reading books. If you don't want to spend the money on college classes, I think that would be a great, just educate yourself. You can't educate yourself enough. And then once you make those connections, I'll be honest with you. I have deals with people like Amazon and Starbucks, but Amazon wants Amazon Fresh grocery stores. They want 43,000 square feet. And they want a tenant improvement allowance. So if I gave them $10 a square foot, I'm already out almost $500,000. You know what I mean? I'm not going to leverage all of my money into tenant improvements for Amazon. You got to spread it in a bunch of different places. I mean, what happens if, the unforeseeable happens? You wouldn't want to put all your money in one basket, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But there are potentials to just meet people, introduce yourself, say like, hey, I'm interesting, maybe raising capital with, somebody that has some money, and you say, all it is, finding the meeting of the mind, so to speak. You find a piece of land and you might get an email from Starbucks and says, hey, we'd love to put a brand new Starbucks here. You might not have the money, but you might know somebody that has the money. And they say, well, since you helped me out, I'll give you 25%. And, that could be huge. And all it takes is one building to really get it going, which is, I think, a little bit of a rant there, but all it takes is one. And then once you have one, it's a lot easier, and you'll be able to know people and trust people, and sorting that whole process has been, definitely that's instrumental in finding people that like and trust, because there are people out there that unfortunately are only there for themselves. But, you got to find people that are willing to invest in you, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And then, so, one of the other things, it can be very different for residential agents is, the property management side of things. If they don't have that experience, and how, how much of a benefit the management of properties can help you in the commercial side and the selling of those properties.
Exactly. So I was taught that you need to learn how a property operates before you can lease it or sell it. Because if you're selling it and you don't know the integral parts of the property, you're going to look like an idiot. So, I was very thankful. I worked with the guy that I worked for had an internal HVAC crew. He had an internal property management. He had his own construction arm at one time that would just build new buildings, and, overhead and profit is 25, 30%. He would save 30% right off the bat. Vertical integration style company. So everything he was doing was in-house, and he was saving money on the back end that way. And what I would do, I knew nothing. I would get in early and stay out late, and I would invest my time. And these are people that are way older than I am. And I would ask them, what kind of Freon is used for different HVAC, water source heat pumps, cooling towers, elevator maintenance, janitorial, and from the bottom all the way to the top of how a building functions, from its most base building items all the way to the most sophisticated operations that a building could have. And what I did was I took these people out to lunch. I wanted to learn about their families. I wanted to learn where they grew up. I wanted to learn more about them. I mean, some of the HVAC guys started off as tree trimmers, and they went to school once again and learned how to be an HVAC technician. And then they still worked in-house within the company. And I just couldn't soak enough of it up. And when I showed a true interest in caring about them and they showed me how things worked, the benefits back to me came, exponentially. And it's just little things. I mean, I remember, some of them were some of them were Dodgers fans, and some of them were Angels fans. And when Christmas came around, I didn't have much money. I was making $50,000 a year. Mm-hmm. I found out from the head HVAC guy what all their hat sizes were, and I just went and got them all the personalized fitted, Dodgers or Angels hats for Christmas. And, it's just a little stuff like that shows them that you appreciate them and you appreciate what they're teaching you. And then they say, whenever you're going to buy your first building, we'll be there to help you. And that's the kind of stuff that I like to do.
Yeah. It's interesting having that approach to things. I talk to a lot of residential agents that kind of, it's almost that same approach to their past clients in that referral thing. You're constantly keeping in touch with them and really, building that relationship with them. So it all comes down to that relationship building.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think staying in contact with people, I will say, so I have a friend that does a lot of residential. And I think he has found his best source of clients from referrals and just being, an honest and open guy, to the point where he's had to turn away business because he's had, especially with COVID and people trying to buy houses and everything like that. But he's always trying to make the community know, or he's always putting stuff on Instagram and talking about his latest listings. He's always being very involved in the community, which I think is a huge part. Helping like the Little League team as being a baseball coach and things like that can go a long way, other than just sending, people, your local football team schedule on it with your, photo and address and phone number at the top, so.
Right. My son's actually involved in baseball here. We are heavily involved, and it's amazing the demographic of people that are involved in that, and the type of business deals and the connections and the networking that you can make just sitting on the sidelines in those places. Yeah. So if like anybody has a kid that is in a sporting event, that's the spot.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's no pressure there. You know what I mean? It's just like, they know what you do, you know what they do. And you build a relationship versus cold calling and say, you want to sell your house. You want to sell your house. I mean, there's people that are much more aggressive. I actually have a friend whose aunt died recently, and the next day they got a flyer in the mail saying, do you want to sell your house? I mean, that's just, like, whoa. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a little too soon. Come on, guys.
Yeah. So, I feel like networking in a realm outside of just direct, do you want to sell your house? Do you want to list your house is probably the best approach.
Yeah. So, kind of before we move into your, what you're doing and, with the commercial, like the actual business side of it, you having this guy take you under his wing and really kind of inspire you to grow in this business. How much of that have you taken on in your business now, with the inspiration of other people to help, get them in with you?
Yeah. So I've taken that, I can't be thankful enough for what I've learned. It's been a little bit of growing pains. So this is someone that was, I guess I'm trying to give you a good example of his approach. Everyone in their office would have a whiteboard, and it would say, this property, this property, this property, this property. And it would say what needs to be accomplished, what needs to be accomplished, what needs to be accomplished. He would come in every single day and say, where are we on this? 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 And that was and you know what, to enable to get from 40,000 square feet and leverage it to 7 million, I don't really see a way that you could do that otherwise without holding people accountable. He had a whole process and a whole book associated to keeping people accountable. And if you fell behind, he was like, you're going to get buried. Because if you own these properties as yourself and you're not staying on top of it like this, the competition of other landlords is going to bury you. And it's kind of funny because I didn't think that it would be this way in South Jersey, but it in comparison to people in California that are much more laid back, oh, let's go surfing for the afternoon kind of a thing. I found it to actually be the opposite. And I've had some struggles. And so to give you another example, if someone were to call on a building and say, hey, I'm interested in leasing space here, can you tell me what it costs? And you would tell them, okay, the base rent is this. And for example, let's just do a retail property. So something called triple nets, which stands for property taxes, property maintenance, and property insurance, otherwise known as, some people call it CAM altogether. The biggest thing to instill is that from the get-go, you need to know who is paying for what. And you, as the listing agent representing a landlord, needs to know who's paying for what. Is the landlord paying for utilities in some states and some expenses, like an office building? Are they're not paying for them for a retail building? So who is paying for what? And you need to make sure you know that as the listing side. And you also need to make sure the person coming in or you're cold calling for also knows what they're going to be responsible for. Because the last thing you want to do is get down the line and they're like, oh, wait a minute, I've got to spend an extra $500-600 a month or $1,000 or $2,000 on something that I thought was included. And then the deal blows apart and you're like, oh, well, maybe if you were up front, that wouldn't have happened. So, and I'm not saying that it's, someone's fault here or there. I'm just saying that up front, like, you've got to be extremely transparent as to who's paying for what. Because, you're going down the line with these people and they're budgeting based on how much square footage they need and how much they can pay for, et cetera, what their build out's going to cost. So bringing, like, we would have a book that would say, this property, this suite, how much is the base rent, how much is the CAM or taxes, how much is the insurance, how much is the maintenance. And I've called people out here and they're like, I have no idea. And I'm like, wait, what do you mean you have no idea? Like, how am I supposed to know what the tenant should be paying for? So it's been a little bit of a frustration in that sense. But yeah, one thing. Okay. So one thing that I will very much instill, which, if you don't have the numbers in front of you, that's one thing. You can look them up. That's fine. But it would be nice to have, right off the spot, say, okay, give me a second. Let me pull up my rent roll here. Okay. This is how much it's going to be. And I just think that shows that you're professional. The one thing that you can do, regardless of having numbers in front of you at the time or not, is you need to have clean, well-lit space. For a lot of, and we'll go back to retail and even office, a lot of unsophisticated users that aren't Google, that aren't Lockheed Martin, that aren't, Jacksonville Jaguars looking to rent office space. A lot of unsophisticated users can't get past, they can't envision a space that used to be, I'm just trying to think of a good example, that used to be a lab space, maybe like GlaxoSmithKline or a pharmaceutical company was using it. And they've got all this lab technician space everywhere. And someone wants to come in just as a law firm. Some people can't see past the fact that there's all this lab tech equipment there. And they're kind of like, you know what, this is going to take too much work. I can't see past this. The sophisticated users, like the big Fortune 500 companies, all those people, they have their own real estate departments. They know, okay, let's just demo it all out and let's make it fit how we want it. Right. But a lot of people, especially for realtors that are looking to get into commercial space, you're not going to have a building where the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to lease, And when you got a small retail center, you got to make sure that the space is clean. You got to make sure it's well lit. And you got to make sure it's presentable for a potential tenant to come into, because they're not going to be able to see their pizzeria or their office space or a nail salon or something like that if the ceiling tiles and insulation is popping out of the wall and the floors are all jacked up and there's wires coming out of everywhere and there's a fridge, a walk-in cooler in the back that looks like it hasn't been, cooling anything in 15 years. Right. So my point is that something that everybody can do, and demo is cheap, and all it is demo and paint and carpet, or you grind, polish, stain concrete floors. All you got to do is just make it look presentable. And I remember So we were spending, with the guy that I worked for, we were spending about $24 million a year on renovating his properties. And this included parking lots, roofs, HVAC, interior spaces for tenant improvements. And we were over budget sometimes because in some instances, when a big name tenant wants a big space, they would say, well, we like Amazon, that example I gave you, they said, well, we want tenant improvement dollars because we're Amazon. So there was a couple of times we were a little bit over budget. And I remember my immediate boss went into the owner's office and said, I need $1 million. So he wrote out his checkbook and gave him $1 million and said, this better buy me a lot of paint and carpet. And that's all that it is. You know what I mean? It's just cleaning the space when the tenant leaves, making sure the floors are smooth, or there's new carpet going down there, and there's paint, and the ceiling tiles are nice and straight, and the lights are on. There's no light bulbs that are out, and the building is painted. I can't tell you how many times where people will try to, just cut corners. You got to make it presentable, and you got to make it simple for tenants to come in and lease your space. And that's the one big takeaway that I think it's focus, and make it simple. Because you're not a mind reader as a listing agent. Right. You got to help people envision their own business. And that's a great way to do it.
Right. And especially for these smaller, for the retail space, like the nail salons or the pizzerias and stuff, a lot of times you're getting people that's the first business that they're opening up for themselves. Right. So they have no idea what that process looks like. They have this idea of what they want their pizzeria, what they want that restaurant to look like, but they've never gone into and renovated a place before.
Exactly. And another example, it's funny, my dad and I were talking about this last night, is that, so I had somebody call me for a building that I have, and they said that they wanted to open a pizzeria. And they asked me if it had a grease trap. And I said, no. And a lot of people, especially restaurant users in this area, want restaurant space that's already been a restaurant because they don't want to pay for the build out, which is, it's not cheap. But you've got to realize, like, the investment in, it's almost better in some instances to go into a space that doesn't have a grease trap, because you don't know what the previous restaurateur, how well they were maintaining the grease trap. And I mean, I've been in instances where one restaurant was a bakery, and they were putting so much sugar down the pipes that the pipes ended up getting corroded over time. And every single restaurant down the row had water flooding up. So, some instances, when you know how to run a building, the property management, like you're saying, that helps you be able to sell a building, or say to somebody, hey, I know you want to open a pizzeria, and I know you want a grease trap already, and I know you want a hood, but it might be better. You don't know what that last person was throwing down the drain, and you don't know how well they were maintaining it. It might be better to just take your own space and build that out, So
yeah, definitely. I think a lot of, and correlating this to residential agents, it's that, making sure that the home is staged right.
Right. Exactly.
To make it pretty neutral so that any family can walk in and see what the potential is there.
Exactly. Yeah. You don't want to have, the place looking like a pigsty, and then people are just going to be turned off. I mean, I think that's pretty simple in terms of residential, and it applies to commercial too.
Right. So when it comes to, finding tenants and getting these places, what kind of marketing do you do for, because obviously that's where some of the main differences come in, is how you're actually getting these deals done and how you're finding the right people for these places. So how are you doing that?
For sure. So I will definitely say, I'm not going to name the company specifically, but they do charge a pretty hefty fee on a monthly basis to be able to have access to some of this data. I initially paid for it, and then decided that it's just not, especially starting my own company, bootstrapping. I've decided that it wasn't the best method to pay all of this money to have information that is essentially public information. So what I would do is there's a website called Regrid, and you can type in any address in the entire country, and you can highlight over, they'll kind of show you like the parcel outline, and you can highlight over that parcel outline and click on it, and it'll tell you who owns it according to the county, how much they paid for it, what it's being taxed at, both on a lease or both on a land value and improvements to the land, the block and lot number, the page and book number that it's associated with in the county records. And then if you want to, so that's kind of like on the landlord side. And then you could contact the landlord via that information. The landlord's property, the address of the person who owns it is on there. It's associated with the county. So going to find landlords, that's one way that I would do that. To answer your question in regards to tenants, there's other than cold calling, a local nail salon or a pizzeria or even what I've done is the thing that I think is the best approach and the line that I use if you're calling somebody that's a bigger tenant, like I'm just trying to think, Staples came to mind. So you could call Staples corporate office and you could say, hi, I'm interested in talking to someone that handles your real estate transactions. Mm-hmm. And they would say, oh yeah, sure. Let me put you in touch with so-and-so. And you might not get to them at first. And you might leave them a message, but I think it's huge to find out like what that person's first and last name is. And then this is really cool. So you can find out what their name is, look them up on LinkedIn. And then there's a company, a website called Rocket Reach. And what it does is it takes people's LinkedIn profiles and it scrapes the email that they use to sign up for their LinkedIn profile. And then it spits out what their email is. So then, because sometimes companies are a little hesitant on giving that information for whatever reason, but that's what I would do. I'd say, hey, I'm interested in talking to the person that handles your real estate transactions. And that's even if you're calling like a local tenant. I think that that's the best way of kind of getting your foot in the door. I actually have like a cold calling playbook that helps kind of get past the executive assistants that I can share with you that could be helpful for some residential agents as well. And it just kind of lets you be assertive, but not be a jerk and say like, this is what I'm trying to get to. Can you help me get there? And there's another, so that's one approach. There's a company called ICSC. This is predominantly for retailers. And they have, I would say, every major retailer that you can think of, they have their real estate representatives' contact information, email and phone number. And I want to say it's maybe, it's probably a couple $100 to sign up to get that list. But if you're representing a landlord and they've got a vacancy, what I've done is I would create a LoopNet page and say, okay, instead of making a brochure or flyer or hiring somebody to do all your marketing or stuff like that, LoopNet kind of does it for you. Mm-hmm. So you have the property, you have the space that you need filled, and then you just send an email. I think it helps go a long way of sending personalized emails instead of sending a market blast email. It's more time invasive, but when you can say, hi, Terry, I'm interested and I have this building. I thought you guys would be interested rather than just, here's a building, take a look at it. You know what I mean? So that's one way. Those are a couple ways that I would go about getting tenants. Another way is going and knocking on doors. You just walk in, look professional. You have a flyer maybe of the property across the street that you have as a listing, and you think that their square footage roughly matches up, and you say, hey, I've got a building over here. The part and list the things that are more advantageous to them as a tenant. Right. The parking ratio is better. We'll give you free rent. We'll give you free rent for your construction period, and we'll give you 10 months of free rent. And you tell them you'll sign a 10-year lease, you give them 10 months of free rent. So say they sign a lease in August, every August, they don't have to write a check. Or pizzeria or restaurants are historically slow after, the holidays are done. Right. Tell them every January, you don't have to write a check for rent. And that could incentivize people. You want to just help show them that you are the better property. And that's kind of some of the approaches I would go about it.
Awesome. Well, what are you seeing, before we wrap up, obviously COVID really threw a curveball in the, commercial space and especially the retail space. So what are you seeing, as you're putting deals together for people? What are people looking for? And then really kind of how are things evolving?
So I would say that in terms of, I guess it's a little bit different in every asset class, like industrial, multifamily. Right. So generally in the real estate cycle, if you look at it as 6 different stages, multifamily is first, which means that it's first to experience both. It's first to experience the high point of the market. And then you have industrial, because those are where products are made. And then you have office, which is after that, because the people that are making those products get made. And then you have retail, which is left for residual income, people to buy pizza or get the nails done, or, go to Dave & Buster's, that kind of a thing. So they each follow different stages, but that's generally how they follow within the timing of how things elapse. And it's usually about 3 to 5 years for the cycle to complete. And different things like COVID really shake it up. I will say, with office, industrial, like we pretty much know where multifamily is. I think that's
right.
Right. So after that, I mean, if we look at industrial, there's big tenants like Amazon. There's a lot of other wholesalers or like pet supplies companies that are taking on industrial space. And what they're looking for is locations by major cities and by major highways that enables them to have their distribution centers to be able to get off the highway, either break down their trucks and split up the stuff inside and spit it out however they want, or put the trucks back on and send it on a ship to go to, Hawaii or wherever, or Europe. That's what I see a lot in New Jersey, because, I'm kind of situated in between Delaware, Philadelphia, New York, and then up north, Boston, and then you've got Europe, especially with some shipping ports in New Jersey and Delaware, et cetera. So you want to find a piece of land. And there are tenants out there that they don't want to pay for a building. Like Jeff Bezos says, why would I pay $30 a square foot for retail space when I can pay $2 for industrial? So there are tenants out there like Amazon that don't want to own a building. They're not in the operation of real estate. I know Bloomberg in New York City, they don't own any of their real estate in New York City. Right. They've done a cost benefit analysis of, is it better for us to lease the building, or is it better for us to own the building? And it's like, once you know that, then you can kind of hone in on finding a tenant requirement and just calling Amazon and saying, hey, I'm interested in helping you guys find what you need. Or if you know somebody that works at Amazon, say, hey, I'm in real estate. Do you guys need room for a new warehouse or trucks or whatever? And then with retail, I would say that there's a lot of people that have saved up income. They want to open new businesses. So for realtors or for commercial brokers that are looking to take on listings or more listings, one thing I will say is be wary of people that have saved up a lot of cash and they want to open a pizzeria. They want to open the next best Indian restaurant. They want to open, they want to open up a daycare center or something. I'm just spitballing here, but you got to really look at the financials, because there's a lot of people out there that have saved up a lot of money from COVID and they want to open up a business. They've never been in business before. One thing I will say is, it's always in a nice way, ask them, how many locations do you have? Or do you have another location? Or how long have you been in business? Or say, I know this is a little weird because we don't know each other, but can you give me kind of a description of your financials, because I'm going to have to go to the owner and tell them, what your financials look like. And the owner is going to approve that based or whether or not you have good financials. So, and that's in terms of the retail space. I think there's a lot of people out there that want to start new businesses, which is great. I mean, I have nothing against small businesses. But I do think that office is going to come back. I know Google just took down massive amounts of square footage in New York City. And I think that that's going to funnel into a lot of different areas within the country. My cousin works for a financial firm down in Charlotte. She's going back to the office.
Right.
It's going to happen slowly over time. I don't know, if you were going to buy an office building, I would definitely make sure that you got some tenants in there to cover the mortgage. Don't do something that's going to cost a lot of money, like a dentist's office or a doctor's office that's going to need a lot of plumbing done. There's a lot of saw cutting involved, and that is going to cost a lot of money to get the tenant to go in there. I think office is going to take a little bit of a while for us to get kind of the engine humming back again. But I think retail is, so this is what I'll say about retail is, you got to find, if you want to buy a building as a realtor, or you want to list something as an agent or a realtor, find something on a heavily trafficked road, because those buildings aren't going away. The buildings that are kind of, out on the outskirts, not many people travel down them. There was maybe, a gas station there at one time with a nice or a nice Quick Mart that everybody used to go to and get their morning coffee at. Those things I would stay away from. You want to have something on a heavily trafficked road, because you could have that gas station and a Quick Mart. And then someone like Carvana could come along and say, hey, we want to put a Carvana here, because the retailers are looking for, even though people are scared of retail, the big names that are coming up are looking for heavily trafficked roads. And that's kind of like the key sauce, or the key ingredient to the recipe, so to speak.
Awesome.
I don't think you can go wrong there.
Perfect. Well, just wrapping up, tell me a little about what are in your future plans? What are you, wanting to do with your business?
Yeah. So I am looking to invest in a couple of different properties with different corporate tenants to either do ground lease deals in a situation where you would buy a piece of land. You would have an interest from a company who says that we want to open up a Raising Cane's or an up and coming, QSR, quick service restaurant. Takeout is definitely going to be, more amplified now that COVID has kind of established that. There's companies like Sweet Green that want to do, drive-throughs. Chipotle now wants to be drive-through focused. I know Starbucks sales go up 30% when they have a drive-through versus having not a drive-through. So what I'm looking for is working with a couple people amongst myself, investors, to invest in property in California as well as in New Jersey and other states, hopefully, to find deals where tenants would be interested in leasing land on high trafficked roads. And then you pretty much say, okay, I'll buy the land. I go to the bank and the bank says, sure, we would love to have someone like Raising Cane's or Chick-fil-A or whomever. And Chick-fil-A pays you a monthly rent. And they lease the ground for 20 years, 25 years. And then at the end of the 25 years, you've not only made those rent payments, but you've also, now you own the building. Now you own the Chick-fil-A. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's kind of the future, at least in terms of a safe investment. I wouldn't go be buying an office building or a retail center that's, 10% occupied in an area that you're really not sure of. I would let the corporate guys kind of do most of the legwork if you can. So that's what I'm looking for, to buy land deals with anybody that would be interested in teaming up with me and making some nice passive income. So.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
Yeah. And thank you for having me. I can't thank you enough.
I want to thank Chris for joining us today. And I think it's awesome how he's building this business of his own, and really appreciate all the tips he shared with agents looking to break into the commercial real estate space. So once again, if you think you or somebody else on your team has an awesome story or tip to share with our community, send us a message at feedback@smartagents.com. Well, that wraps things up for this episode. But remember, follow the show wherever you listen to podcasts, and make sure to subscribe to the Smart Agents YouTube channel. Again, I'm Michael Walter, and we'll see you on the next episode.